his experiences with a formerly lay-led congregation, which we are doing now ourselves. So join me in welcoming Ryan Cameron.
Good morning again.
Good morning.
It's good to be among you again. I have to acknowledge the miracle that occurred this Sunday of this service. Due to an unfortunate spelling error in my email address, we were completely out of communication in preparation for this service. So the fact that Terry put together such a great service is a testament to a miracle, I would say. So I'm sure he was wondering and sweating that if I walk in the door this morning as a result. So last night, I completely threw out my sermon. I mean, of course, it's still saved on my hard drive, but the effects of yesterday's court decision was profound, in my opinion. It really affected me in a unique way, and I thought it would be very important to discuss that with you today as well. So I'm going to completely modify my service today and move myself out of my comfort zone, which is usually a big piece of paper that I can read from, and kind of talk to you a little bit informally. I also wanted to talk about my topic, which is why I'm pro-choice, and because I feel that is really important to discuss as well. So I'm going to highly abbreviate my sermon about that topic, and then talk a little bit about the George Zimmerman trial decision, and then hopefully and I'm sure there will be enough time for you to come forward and share your thoughts on either topic as well. I grew up in a rural community in west central Nevada. So rural, in fact, that the neighboring town was 100 miles away. So you can imagine we were very isolated out in the middle of nowhere in Nevada. As a result, the people I resided with were highly conservative. My family's fairly progressive, of course. We often said that we were Unitarian Universalists sojourning in the desert, and we actually were members of the Presbyterian congregation because that was as liberal as we could find out there. And it was important that you establish a religious community when you live in a place like that, because if you didn't, you were hassled by a lot of people. Why aren't you coming to our church? So all of my peer group, most of them, were fairly conservative. My senior year in high school, Nevada put on their ballot initiative. A ballot initiative would actually codify the decision of Roe v. Wade. Nevada's anti-abortion laws, of course, were completely thrown out by the Roe v. Wade court decision. So this ballot initiative would actually have taken the Nevada law and codified it in the Nevada Constitution, giving women a right to choose on the Nevada Constitution. Nevada doesn't have a provision which allows citizens to have initiatives. The only voting decisions they can make is actually to amend the Constitution. And it's a complicated, multi-year process to do it. And it's actually the last year it was taken into the voters. So all of a sudden, this issue became an important topic. Really, it was symbolic because the court decision had already overruled the Nevada laws. So it really was a moot point at that point. So it was more of a symbolic gesture to have these removed formally from our state codified. And also, just in case Roe versus Wade were somehow overturned, then the Nevada law would then take effect again. So this actually eliminated any chance of that happening. So for the first time ever, I was confronted with a decision. I was a senior in high school. This was in 1990. The first time I would ever have to vote. So I was kind of excited. And this ballot initiative was on the Nevada ballot. And it's the first time I was really confronted with having to make a decision about this. I naturally was resistant to abortion. My peer group was very much opposed to it. My parents were fairly progressive in the sense that they kind of let me make my own decision. They didn't want to influence me on making this decision. And they also looked at it as, this is the first time you get to vote, so it's important that you have your say on this decision. So for the first time ever, as an 18-year-old boy, I had to make a decision about this topic that I had not thought about before. All of my peer group, pretty much everybody, was dead set against the idea of an abortion. And when I first thought about it, I of course rejected the idea of an abortion. I just thought it was a no-brainer, as it were. Of course, this is a life we're talking about. We have to protect the life. Of course. So to me, it was just a no-brainer. Absolutely no question that I would vote no on this initiative. The initiative, by the way, was a pro-choice initiative. So voting no means that you're actually wanting the law to stay in effect. So, I also have to tell you that why should I even make a decision about this?
Come a little bit closer to the microphone.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
Thank you.
The blower might be difficult that's something new that I have to experience. And I'm so tall, I probably have to lean a little bit. So, here was me for the first time facing a major decision, first time voting, and I didn't know what to do. I really thought about it. I was also a nerd, to say the least, so I was in the debate club at the school, and the debate coach took it upon herself to have this discussion in our debate class. So to me, actually it was after school, so to me it was an opportunity to really hear the arguments for and against it. And of course, being a good debate coach that she was, she made us take both sides of the issue. Have to be able to effectively argue both sides of that issue, and that's the best way how to debate. So I got to experience for the first time a hard decision to make. And my decision initially was no. I don't want abortions. I don't want them. Now, why should I make this decision? I'm a man. The choices, the reality is that I will never actually have to personally choose whether I should have an abortion or not. So why am I making this decision? And furthermore, I'm a gay man. So the chances of my partner having to make a decision as well are mute. So to me, the abortion topic is something probably I will never be touched by. I will never have to make any type of decision about whether or not myself or someone I care about will have to go through that procedure. So I kind of distance myself from this decision. But why should I vote to be pro-choice? I thought about it. And then something happened to me that changed my perspective dramatically. I will call her Angela. She was one of my classmates. Actually, she was 2 grades lower than me. Became pregnant. Now, mind you, at the time, Nevada had the highest teenage pregnancy rate in the country. And my county, where I lived in, had the highest teenage pregnancy rate in the state of Nevada. So I lived in the highest percentage county in the highest percentage state for teenage pregnancy. Mind you, the population was so incredibly small that 2 pregnancies probably would tilt the scale one way or another, so it was pretty insignificant in reality. But still, we had to deal with this quite often. In fact, a former roommate of mine thumbed through my high school yearbook, and he was amazed at how small my hometown was. And he thumbed through it, and he was curious that there was some strange anomaly in my hometown, apparently, because there were 4 sets of people, or a total of 8 people in my high school class of 60, actually, that had the same last name. So there must be something in the water. Everybody in your hometown is having twins. In reality, there was 1 set of twins in my high school class, and the other 3 were married.
Oh my.
So, no. That's, it's a small town. People get along pretty well, and we were so isolated that the whole marriage thing happened pretty early in your life. So that gave you kind of a perspective of where I lived and grew up. So this idea of abortion just was so alien to me. It was just not talked about in my town. And now we're confronted with this ballot initiative that we have to make a decision. I turned my church pastor, who of course was dead set against it, and told me that, well, from God's perspective, you're killing a life and that's how it should be, and we should protect this innocent victim of the circumstances. But then something happened. Angela, I'll call her, became pregnant. She became pregnant. And the town and community was a little shaken by this. Angela was an average high schooler. She wasn't the most popular girl in school. She wasn't the least popular either. But she happened to get involved with someone in my school that was extremely popular. Star of the football team, star of the basketball team. The ideal high school student, as you can say. And people oftentimes wondered why. Why was this situation, as it were? Why did he choose to be with her? Why did this relationship develop to begin with? Angela had a close network of friends, very supportive friends, and they all warned her, he's no good. He is no good to you. Get away from him. He is using you. He's abusing you. He's manipulating you. And she was blinded by love. You ever seen that? You watch these talk show programs on television, and you have that, but I love him. I love him. He's so special. In reality, what was happening is he was so incredibly popular, not only in my hometown, but in other communities as well. He was known because of his football star status. So she was just enamored by the popularity that she was getting from this guy. He kind of pulled her up and elevated her to a different status than she was used to. And she liked being in that status. And she didn't want to give that up so easily. But her friends, her good friends, were warning her, get away from this guy. Last night, for instance, we were at a party together and he flirted with me. He wanted to be with me as well. He's no good for you. But she was blinded by love. Now I have to imagine the actual conversations and what happened, because of course I wasn't there, so I have to speculate on it. So this is a speculation. But I can imagine that the pressure of having a sexual relationship was extreme. Putting this poor girl in a situation where if you don't do it, I'm going to leave you. And of course, my rural, religiously conservative town didn't have a very active sexual health education program in school as well. We did have it, but it was very broad. And my father told me that the teacher was actually just totally afraid to get too much into the details. Just cover the basics, get over with, and done. So we didn't have a sexual health education program. And I'm sure availability to birth control was just simply not available. Or he could have said, I don't want to use a condom. I don't want to do that. I want to be with you. And this is the only way that you will be able to continue to have this relationship with me, is for me to have this. So my guess is that she reluctantly consented to that. Reluctantly consented to that. And she became pregnant as a result of that. When I first was opposed to abortion, I always thought in my mind, I'm going to exclude rape. When a woman is raped, she should be allowed to have an abortion. Only in those circumstances. Of course, I was being a hypocrite because a child conceived of rape has the same rights and privileges as someone who isn't. It just makes no sense to me now, but at that time that made sense. Then I learned of this circumstance, and then I had to ask myself, Was she not raped? Was she not raped? Of course, to the eyes of the law, she was not raped. She gave consent. She allowed this to happen. She allowed it to happen. So to the eyes of the law, she was not raped. But the emotional feelings of having him deny that that child was his, even though she had not been with any other person, so it could not have possibly been any other person but him. Having her humiliated by him, accusing her of being a slut, being a trollop, going with every guy that she sees, denying the pregnancy, having the parents of the boy come forward and make the same accusations against her. It's not, my son would not do that. He's a star athlete. He's this, he's that. My son would not do it. She is obviously been sleeping around with anybody she wants to. All in the visual confines of a small rural Nevada town where everybody has to work with each other, where we run into each other in the post office, we run into each other at the local grocery store. There was no escape for her. She had to confront this situation. Was she raped? No. Legally, no. But the emotional trial that she went through, the emotional pain that she suffered as a result of her pregnancy, changed my mind on that topic. She was as raped as any person was. Manipulated, lied to get the goal of it. Of course he left her. Then she was faced with having the baby or not. She was religiously conservative. And of course everybody said, oh, she's got to have the baby. She's got to. But the torment and the torture of having to go through the legal process of establishing paternity, proving that this child is his, and then be forced and to be subjugated by him and having him a part of her life for the foreseeable future was traumatic, I can say the least. Here he is, abusing her now, making accusations. Then when it finds out that he is indeed the father, then she has to deal with him on a legal basis, going after him for child support, going to court on a repeated basis and having to deal with custody hearings and cases and all of that stuff as well. 18, 20 for the rest of her life. She would have to face that. And what a tragedy that would be. A child caught in between two parents that are fighting with each other. How can you survive that? Should she have made the decision? Should she have listened to the advice of her peers that told her he was no good? Absolutely. But hindsight is 20/20. When you are faced in that situation without adequate education, without adequate access to those decisions of sexual health preventative and pregnancy preventative measures, how can you face that? She was as raped as anyone I know, manipulated, tormented. And then it hit me. If she is in that circumstance, even though she was not legally raped, other people must also be in the same situation. And they're forced to make a decision based on that. And it's my responsibility to provide them an escape, to allow them to make an extremely difficult decision to save the life of the child. I could not imagine being grown up in a household where my father and mother hated each other and pawned off me between the two parents and used me to get at the other, going through legal hearings and court cases and listening to my father demean my mother and my mother demean my father. What a life that would be. Sadly, so many of us live that life, and I consider myself extremely lucky that I didn't. There are members of my family who go through that. So to me, it was so wrong for me to impose my religious at that time beliefs on that family, to tell her that you don't have this option. You have to suffer these consequences. It was your fault. As if a child is some form of punishment. It's not. She made a bad decision. She was afraid of the consequences of not going through with that. She would lose her status in the school. She would lose her peer group. Possibly a breakup would occur and she would be diminished by this person who was very popular. Saying, well, I'm going to tell everybody that you're no good, that you're a harlot or slut. Because I'm going to protect my reputation at the expense of yours. We're talking teenage mentality here. She was as raped as any woman ever, manipulated and changed. And that's really what changed my opinion. Living through that in my small town as we watched my small town, and of course everybody knew everything. Everybody had an opinion about what was going on and had to say so. So that's why I'm pro-choice. Everyone has a right to do with themselves what they think is best for themselves. Angela, that's not her real name, by the way, decided for an open adoption. And a neighboring community, she found two parents that decided to adopt her child openly. So she still remained part of that child's life and upbringing, but decided to give the child up for adoption. And I find that an honorable choice that she made. She suffered the indignity. She suffered the humility of showing up to school pregnant and all the whispering that occurred in the town. And she braved through all of that and decided to do what she felt was right. And she has every right to make that decision. And if the decision to have an abortion, I don't blame her. How could I? How could I look at this girl and say, you don't have the right to make that choice? You were manipulated by this person. You have the right to determine what you do to your life. Could have ruined her opportunities. Having to now raise a child instead of going to school. Making those difficult decisions. And so many times we see it. And now it brings us to today, where we have all these various states passing these more and restrictive abortion legislation on its citizens, making it more difficult for people to access abortion. Not banning it outright, unless it's more than 20 weeks, but specifically targeting these rural communities like mine and removing their ability to have an abortion clinic and denying access to people who are poor, especially poor people, who are more likely to be in that situation than wealthy people. And then wealthy people in those situations have more options. They can afford it. They can go somewhere else to get it. A person in a impoverished home does not have that choice. So this is now an attack on classism. This is now an attack on women's liberties. And to have women go through these invasive procedures as well, it's just hideous. Sometimes they were raped as well, and having to go through another humiliating and invasive procedure after suffering through that is just absolutely appalling to me. So if you ask me today, I'm still very much opposed to the concept of an abortion. I hope that the mother makes a decision to save the life of the child, to have the child, to move forward, even if it means an open adoption or raising it on their own. And hopefully the community will come together and support that choice of that person. But I am never, ever going to make a condemnation when someone has to make that choice and they choose to have an abortion. Simply because I don't know the circumstances. I don't know the reason. And it's so incredibly wrong for me to impose my values on someone else and allowing them to make that choice. It's so important that we allow that. So that's why I'm pro-choice. Not bad for winging it, huh? And of course, yesterday we had the, for many, surprising verdict of the Zimmerman trial. To me, it wasn't that great of a surprise. When I heard initially that he was being charged with second-degree murder, I'm like, are they crazy? They're never going to get a second-degree murder conviction on this. There's just simply not enough evidence to support showing an intent to kill. Obviously, this guy was stalking and casing this individual, but that doesn't imply intent to kill. So a second-degree murder conviction, it just absolutely seemed ridiculous to me. What are the state doing? They're going to lose this case simply because of that. Manslaughter seemed much more likely to me. Because here's a person who is acting negligent in a situation where he was specifically told not to do something by law enforcement personnel, and he did it anyway, and he entered a situation where he had to make a life or death decision. Whether Trayvon attacked him first or he attacked him first does not matter. Because in reality, if I'm being followed by somebody strange in the night, I'm going to be a little apprehensive. And I'm going to probably want to defend myself as well. So even if Trayvon attacked George Zimmerman initially, did he have the right to do that? Did he have the right to defend himself? He was feeling threatened. We hear about these laws about just stand your ground. If you feel threatened, you get to defend yourself, even to the death. Wasn't that the case for Trayvon? Wasn't he defending his ground? Even if he was the initiator of the attack, was he not defending his ground and saying, I am being attacked, I am being followed by this person, and I don't know what his intentions are. Do I not have the right to defend myself? And then you're talking about a developing mind, a 17-year-old boy who doesn't have the wherewithal to understand the concepts of consequences yet, who doesn't understand that you need to stop beating up somebody at a certain point and get away from the situation rather than confronting the situation. So we have that to consider as well. It is truly a tragedy, absolutely tragic. And the telling parts of the case, to me, are the fact that he was told to stop and he didn't. And that, to me, was the cause of the situation. That's what put them in the life or death situation. And then the fact that Trayvon really was not a criminal. He was doing nothing wrong at all. He was walking home from a store. That's all he was doing. With tea and Skittles, yes. That's all he was doing. He wasn't breaking into homes. He wasn't vandalizing anything. He was simply walking home. And he didn't look like he belonged. And what made him not look like he belonged? And of course, we come to the race. If Trayvon was a white child, a 17-year-old, I firmly believe he would be alive today, and we would not hear of this case at all. The fact that he was a hoodie-wearing black teenage boy profiled him to be up to no good, walking through a neighborhood he shouldn't be in, and then called police on, even though he made no crime. I understand if he was breaking into a home, you call the police. I understand if you're violating or vandalizing the property, you call the police. But this kid was not even doing that at all. Walking home, talking on his cell phone to a friend of his on his way home to watch a game. And someone made a life or death decision. And now that person, at least for the foreseeable future, is not going to have to pay the consequences for making that decision. And that pains and hurts me like you can't believe. An innocent 17-year-old boy is dead because this man didn't listen to the instructions that he was given. Now I'm sure that eventually a civil case will be brought against him, and he'll probably be found responsible for the death of Trayvon Martin, which means that he will never be able to profit from this if he gets a book deal or a movie deal or something like that, because the family will get all of that money. And he will have to suffer the consequences of this for the rest of his life in many different ways. So justice is served differently, I think, in this case, but it will be served eventually. And now I'm hearing rumors that the federal government may come in and press charges against racial profiling against him, which would create another interesting scenario. Honestly, I don't think that stands much of a chance either. Civil case does, but not probably any criminal proceedings. Because if he found himself in a life or death situation and he was being pummeled by Trayvon as he suggested, he may have the right to defend himself from that. But we don't know. Wow, I actually used more time than I thought. Sorry. So if anyone has some thoughts, brief thoughts, it would look like it will have to be on this, on either topic, I invite you to come forward and share your thoughts.
Good morning, I'm Nick Reachback, and I do have some thoughts in this case, and one of the thoughts that I have is that I agree wholeheartedly with everything I've heard. But I also think back on other things that are happening in our country today, and one is the eradication of our democracy. And I remember back in the 60s, there was a very unpopular case going on in western Washington state, and especially in the Seattle area. The circumstances were not the same as Trayvon Martin's, but it was a matter of obvious injustice. Somebody had been killed by some drunken hunters, and in the course of trying to protect themselves, they shot one of the hunters with a bow and arrow. One of the people that was on the jury trial happened to be a supervisor at Boeing where I worked, and I happen to know the man personally. And when the verdict came that the people who had killed this man were innocent, and that somebody was guilty of assault with a bow and arrow, pardon my French, but the shit hit the fan. A very unpopular decision. And when I asked Ralph, the supervisor, how could it be that the jury decided the way they did, he says, I don't have time to tell you, but I tell you one thing. As much as I disagreed, it reinforced my faith in the trial system that we have in America. And today I have to keep telling myself that this very unpopular decision that we had yesterday may be very much like that, that everybody went, as Ralph said, by the letter of the law, not by how we feel, but by what the law said. And of course we have some ridiculous laws, but if they're on the books, they have to be followed. And it's us sometimes who know what justice really should be to have to bite the bullet accept this crap until it can be changed. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Christine Carmona. And as far as the decision for the Trayvon Martin case, I think they made the wrong decision. I'm surprised that the people in Florida that were on Trayvon Martin's side aren't protesting and even rioting. I'm surprised they're taking it lying down. It's ridiculous. It not only tells me that we have a ridiculous jury system here, ridiculous justice system in this country, if any, but also that United Statesians are taking what's going on lying down. We're getting our rights taken away. While we speak right now, FISA court is rewriting the Constitution. You know, we're losing the Constitution, the very thing that our founding fathers wrote to make sure that we keep our rights, that we keep our freedom. They're rewriting it. And it's going to be that the rich get to do whatever they want, and the poor have to take everything lying down. This has got to change. We got to get out there and protest. We got to do something about this, or we're going to lose this country. Thank you.
I just wanted to say, politicians make decisions every day which indirectly kill people. I mean, you can look at the statistics when they make decisions on health care, immigration, people die. But they didn't pull the trigger, so they can pretend that they're not responsible. And then they try to tell women what to do. So it's amazing.
Okay, so I think we're ready to go to our closing hymn, number 348. One of my favorite, actually, is Guide My Feet.
Rise as you will. As we extinguish our chalice, please join me in reading our mission statement as a demonstration of our fellowship, our support for one another, and our commitment to the wider community. This church provides a safe place to celebrate diversity, draw inspiration for our lives, foster social and environmental justice, and compassionately support each other in our spiritual searches. Thank you to our musician, Paul Dodder, to Dorothy Ward for our chalice lighting, to our greeters, and to all others who are helping today. And of course, to Ryan Conlon, if I may, provide some closing words. They shall beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war any more. But they shall all sit under their own vines and fig trees, and no one shall make them afraid. Meet you all outside in the fellowship hour. Thank you for coming today.